In episode 1 of the Sky News analysis of Malcolm Turnbull's downfall, Victorian Senator James Paterson observed that Turnbull's behaviour since leaving the leadership was what his colleagues have always had to endure. And today, on the front page of the Australian newspaper, Attorney-General Christian Porter has revealed more of the real character of our 29th Prime Minister. You see, in Porter's account, which hasn't been denied despite a flurry of tweets from the former PM, Turnbull tried to use the Governor-General as some kind of human shield to save his Prime Ministership. According to reports, Turnbull told Porter that if Dutton were to be elected, Sir Peter Cosgrove would refuse to swear him in on the grounds that he was ineligible to sit in the Parliament under Section 44 of the Constitution. Now, you'll recall the issue at the time related to the ownership by Mrs Dutton of a childcare business, and that as that business received government money in a sort of roundabout way via childcare payments owed to parents, according to Turnbull, it brought into question Mr Dutton's eligibility because Section 44 prohibits anyone taking office as an MP if they have a direct financial interest in any agreement with the Commonwealth. Of course, this was an issue that had never bothered Mr Turnbull before, until the moment it obviously became clear that Dutton was serious about challenging his leadership. Indeed, this is the same Peter Dutton whom earlier in the week, as he himself made clear on Sky on Tuesday night, Turnbull apparently had offered to make deputy leader if it would stave off a challenge and save Turnbull's job. Now, either Turnbull had spoken to the Governor-General to advise him on Dutton's eligibility, which would amount to a highly improper act to prejudice the head of state against a member of his own executive council, or he had verbaled the Governor-General in an attempt to intimidate the Attorney-General. Now, either way, this is a huge issue, and a little later on in the show I'll be joined by a legal expert to explain exactly why this matters. But to his very great credit, the Attorney-General Christian Porter refused to be bullied, and that would have taken some guts. Let me tell you, I have seen Malcolm Turnbull at his raging best, or worst, as it should be regarded. Remember Utegate? So let me tell you, Porter holding his ground shows yet again why many in the party say he's got the mettle of a leader. We know from the reports today that Porter disagreed with Turnbull's pronouncement that Dutton was ineligible, and that Porter was forced to insist that the only communication with the Solicitor-General was to be from him as attorney. Now, that's proper, that's how it should be, but not how Turnbull saw it. And also, not from a plainly desperate PM. You don't want him in conversation with your Solicitor-General. Yet even after apparently agreeing with Porter that it would be improper for the Prime Minister to make separate contact with the law officer whose advice the government would rely upon, Turnbull was apparently still stalking the Solicitor-General, who had to avoid contact with the Prime Minister. Can you imagine any more squalid, scheming, unworthy behaviour from the man who was for 3 years our head of government? But should we be surprised? This was a bloke who always saw the Prime Ministership as his personal birthright rather than an act of service to the nation. And try as hard as he might to rewrite history when his book comes out, if it comes out, it's got problems getting legal defamation cover from publishers, but if it comes out later on this year, let's never forget that Malcolm Turnbull brought all of this on himself. Trying to get the government to adopt a Labor-light energy policy was a huge political error from Turnbull, and he compounded that by spilling his own leadership at the beginning of the week that led to his demise. But having made his own position untenable, Turnbull then inflicted further needless damage on the government and the party by refusing to hold a party room meeting when he was petitioned in the normal way by 2 MPs. Instead, you'll recall, he insisted on a petition being signed by over half the party room. Now, I might add here that I thought it was very damaging for Arthur Sinodinos, who admitted on air on Tuesday night that this perversion of party room conventions, this 43 votes idea, was his brains trust suggestion to Turnbull. But back to Turnbull. Now, you might say, why is anyone surprised? And you'd be right. Almost no one who's worked with Turnbull remembers it fondly. But why did people who knew how he'd undermined and backstabbed Brendan Nelson ever make him party leader? And why did people who knew how he'd undermined and backstabbed and leaked against Tony Abbott ever make him Prime Minister? Well, in the first case, in the case of Brendan Nelson, it was because they thought they'd never be rid of Turnbull without giving him his chance. In the second case, the Abbott case, it was worse. He surfed into the top job, exploiting the fears of callow backbenchers about the polls and the greed of second-rate frontbenchers who sold themselves for promotion. Plainly, at the election we've just had, Turnbull would have led the Liberals to a catastrophic defeat, and the party would have entered history as a shameful, embarrassing shambles. Worse still, Australia would have been doomed to a shortened Labor government. It would have been the most disastrous in our history, but just in time, the Liberals woke up to what they had done to themselves and just where Turnbull was about to take them and the country, and they got rid of him. No one who's watched last night or Tuesday night could now think that removing Turnbull was a mistake. The real pity, of course, for the Liberal Party and our country is that he was ever in the top job at all.